Excuse me, can you guys hear me? I can't, I don't have any audio from you all. Hey, Steve.
Carlos, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I can hear you too, so.
I too don't have audio from the authority.
Yeah.
We have audio now?
Yep, I got you.
Great. You didn't miss anything. Well, we're doing a roll call right now.
Present.
Chairman, that concludes the roll call.
Okay. Now we'll move into our agenda. First, we'll take up the consideration of amendments to the action meeting agenda. And I'm going to begin by asking for a motion to add the VDOT SPA agreement to the to our agenda, item 6 of old business. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Roll call.
May I request Mr. Gregory to lead the roll call?
We could just have an oral vote, and if there's any nays, you could take a roll call then to clarify.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
We will add that to the old business. Item 2, approval of October 14th, 2020 CVTA Finance Committee meeting minutes.
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and there's been a seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 2 is approved. Now moving on to item 3, the open public comment period. Are there any persons from the public who wish to offer comments via email or in person?
We did not
Carson,
receive
you have
any.
any?
We did not receive anything virtually.
No virtual comments? No in-person comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, CVTA Finance Committee Chairman's report. First, I want to thank everyone for being here today. Seems that as if we may have gotten through an election, so survival is key in 2020. This is our 4th meeting of the CVTA Finance Committee, and I would like to say I look forward to discussing some of our new business items today, as they will help us continue to move the authority forward. As I believe Chairman Thornton stated before, this is a brand new authority, and so the work that we do here on a monthly basis is key to continue to move the authority forward and set up a model that we can use beyond our time in these seats. And so let's continue to perfect the work and get the job done so we can stand up Central Virginia Transportation Authority that we all, as a region, can appreciate and be proud of. So with that, we'll move into item 5, the CVTA staff report. Is here, Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to start off and then cede the floor to Mr. Ure, the chair of the CVTA Technical Committee, and then close that with Ms. Heater and a finance working group update. The staff has been hard at work. As you know, you've seen some correspondence from us. We've been providing support for the authority itself, plus the 2 committees, the finance and the technical committee. Some of the specific things that you're not getting an update on in other portions of the report today, we are continuing to work through possible locations for the next 2 authority meetings, December 4th and January 29th. We do have a number of leads, one being the Richmond District VDOT offices, which are brand new, newly opened, and were offered up as an opportunity following the last meeting on October 30th. So we're excited about that.
We like you.
It is
Sir.
a very nice facility.
So I think that could be I don't know if we need an action item, but that could be a decision that this committee can take to the authority. And the sooner we have the location decided upon, the better off we are.
Do a consensus that that's where we should go for the next one?
I mean, in absence of the fact that Henrico's not available, but I did a tour of the facility and it is state of the art. And I would even talk to Shane Mann and see if we can actually get a tour of the facility perhaps after the meeting, because it is probably one of the most modern facilities we have in the Commonwealth of Virginia when you talk about technology.
Mr. Carroll, I'll take your word for it.
Chairman, I guess the chairman of CVTA probably needs to make that decision.
Well, let's see what it looks. Let's see what that looks like, and make our decision after that.
Okay, thank you very much. Another announcement, I'm not sure we've said it in public, but there is a new URL that's been set aside for the CVTA that will take people to the page now where all the agendas and meeting materials are, and it's cvtava.org. So hopefully we can start spreading that news and get people plugged into the authority as we start making big decisions over the next few months. Now that there is an agenda item under old business, we'll wait until then to go over the VDOT MOA update. And with that, I think it's, unless there's other questions from the members, we can invite Mr. Ure to the table to give a TAC update.
Thank you, Chet. Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Brief report, CVTA TAC meeting held their second meeting on October 13th. At that meeting, we discussed regional project prioritization process and began that conversation with respect to how to integrate with the Plan RBA's long-range transportation plan efforts. Also, we talked about the regional public transportation plan, which is going to be headed up by GRTC, and also the transit service governance report, which, as the committee may recall, there is a report due to the General Assembly and Governor's Office December 1. Third meeting will be this afternoon, be a virtual meeting. There are same three items will be further reviewed and discussed with action requested on the draft scope of the transit service governance report. And additionally, we'll be discussing the SPA, which will be also talked about on your agenda this morning. So unless there's any questions, that's the TAC report.
Mr. Ure, I'll just make it for the record. I just want to say that it's my hope that the options that our consultants provides related to the GRTC governance and the establishment of the transportation district should recommend policies and processes that determine that the pros and cons of GRTC becoming a transportation district, and that they're identifying options to include new or enhanced governance structure as well. And I don't know what's the next steps in that process. I guess you guys will take that up in the TAC meeting this afternoon.
We'll take it up in the TAC meeting this afternoon, Mr. Chair, and also that's included in the scope for the report to cover those items.
Okay. Wonderful.
Good morning. Just wanted to give you a couple of updates on some administrative items. The notice for the request for proposals for your insurance coverage is out. We've had 2 inquiries thus far. We had a press release that went out last week, and advertisements have been scheduled for placement in the newspapers as discussed at the meeting. We've also got the public hearing rolling forward for not only public comment on the operating budget, but also the public hearing to be scheduled on December 4th. So those items are moving forward. We've continued to work with the finance working group over the last several weeks to move a number of agenda items forward. Today we have Matt Harris here from Chesterfield and Megan Coates from Henrico. I'm looking to see if we have anybody else. Back in the back we have, I'm sorry, I can't see your face. Sheila Rollerson is also with us. We've had a great group that's been connecting with us over virtual meetings and are going to have a report from them later in the meeting this morning with some recommendations for moving forward on a number of different items. What else? Any other questions? I'll let you. I think most of the things are on the agenda item from the finance work group, so we'll move forward with those items.
Any questions from the members? Thank you, Ms. Heater. Carter, you got anything else?
No, sir. Thank you.
We'll move on to old business then.
The draft agreement has been reviewed with the suggestions that were provided to you last meeting. I think, Mr. Gregory, you've circulated that among the jurisdiction's legal counsel.
We have.
And today, I think we're looking for, if you're ready, action to recommend approval to the full authority at their December meeting.
Is there any discussion from the committee? No?
I mean, I think they've made some appropriate changes to the MOU that I think will work well for the future, and I'll make a motion to move it forward to the full committee on a recommendation for approval.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, Mr. Peterson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The motion will be, the recommendation will be forwarded to the committee.
Mr. Brown? I
Mr.
didn't
Brown,
hear the vote.
Yes, I did.
Oh,
Very
Mr. Brown.
Wanted to make sure you're not left out.
Trust me, that rarely happens with me.
Thank you.
Very good.
Is there another item for old business?
Yes, sir. 6B, the FY21 administrative and operating expense budget. This has been, we've heard your concerns and have addressed some of the items. It's back on the agenda this month with the requested action to recommend authority adoption of the budget. And again, this is just the administrative and operating expense budget. Nicole, can we put that on the screen? It is in your agenda packet on the last page.
Mrs. Page had requested, I think during the budget discussion, that we provide the schedule by positions that we had programmed into our cost proposal, the hours and the associated billable rates. So this is just an itemization for you. We can circulate this to the whole authority if it's the format that you'd like. The budget, as it's shown on the screen, is what's been advertised. That was the action from the October 30th meeting. And if you have changes to the budget, those would need to be taken up from a process perspective on the December 4th meeting. But certainly if you have suggested changes that you want to come out of the committee today, now would be the time to talk those through.
Any discussion from the members?
I guess I do have a question. I know some of the things we're talking about in the new business would shift some of these funds around from this. But I don't know if that's really necessary in terms of the overall budget, getting it going, but whether that would delay it if we started playing with the numbers now. Is that, I'm thinking in terms of the financial advisors and what have you, that would shift some of the funds out of the reserve for contingency into other places.
I think it's up to you. You could.
We're okay going forward. We're recommending this go forward with the understanding that those would be shifted later. Rather, I don't want to slow the process down, is what I'm saying.
Sure. I think you have a number of different options. The budget that's in front of you that was in your packet is what's been advertised, but you can certainly modify in December if you need to make changes based on the activities that are happening.
And that's a public hearing we're holding in December
right.
anyway, so it'd be appropriate to
I
make
move
those.
recommended it that it goes forward.
I'll second it.
It's been, the motion has been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend, as this was asked for, if little CVT, board, this be sent to all members.
Okay. Mr. Peterson recommends that this be forwarded to all members of the CVTA full body. Make sure that happens, Mr. Parker.
Yes, sir.
All right.
I think for the purposes of people who may be listening, if anybody at home, what we're talking about is a numerical breakdown of all the expenses that's been provided by Plan RVA in relation to their budget portion, which was the 201,464. I just want to make sure that
Yeah,
the
the
new.
schedule of proposed hours in
Yep.
relation to fiscal year 2021.
And I guess, Mr. Chair, one final timing clarification. The public review period is open now, and it runs through November 23rd. We will consolidate any comments that were received on the budget after that closing date and distribute it to the authority for consideration of the December 4th meeting.
Any further questions on what else do we have on old business?
We had an agenda item added for the VDOT SPA agreement.
That's right. Any discussion on the SPA agreement?
I think a staff update may be the best way to kick that off. So we have, in conversation with VDOT, we have come to the understanding that they are not, that VDOT wants to introduce a full package to the CTV for consideration. And the discussion was that that could be done at the December meeting of the CTV. But the clarification of the full package is not just the MOA, which the authority took action on October 30th. It also includes the two exhibits, the SPA and the reporting form. So up for discussion today, I think by the Finance Committee first is what steps can we take if that's the direction chosen to get agreement on the full MOA with exhibits so that it can be put on the CTV agenda. If that's not the wish of the authority, then we may not get on the agenda in December and it will be put on the agenda in a later month. We do have Commissioner Britch and Ms. Farmer joining us virtually if there are any questions of them. But I think the question for this committee is are we ready to move forward expeditiously, or do we want to consider further changes to the language of the two exhibits and take action?
Mr. Peters.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the question because basically we're talking about the forms that will be used going forward, not the actual agreement. Why do the two have to be contained together? And why can't we go forward with memorandum of understanding? And I guess Carlos is on here too with CTV. But we need to keep moving expeditiously.
Right, it was our staff's interpretation of the MOA, language in the MOA that seemed to imply that the MOA could be approved and then at some future date, the SPA, if changes needed to be made to that, could be approved later. So we move forward, let's get the MOA done and then we'll deal with the SPA because that's what the MOA language allows. We had discussed the notion that, look, this is an agreement with exhibits. You don't want to approve an agreement without the exhibits already resolved. But with the language in the MOA being what it was, it seemed to imply that you could do that. So that's what the consensus was. Let's go ahead and get the MOA resolved, which we pretty much did. We did at the last meeting with the idea that the CTV would agree to that process, approve the MOA, then worry about the exhibits later. The CTB is, or VDOT would prefer to, as Chet mentioned, to approve the entire package together, which also makes sense. It's hard to approve an agreement and enter into that agreement if you're not unclear what those exhibits say, which are incorporated into that agreement. So it's just working that out with VDOT for the CTB, and VDOT wants it all resolved before the CTB can take it up, which is fine. They've also suggested that they could, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they could sort of fast track the MOA with the exhibits once they're resolved in December, if there is agreement. The SPA is still in draft form. We believe it's a good agreement. Some of the member jurisdictions, their staff had concerns about the certain provisions in the SPA. We're working through those. Comments have been shared. They're going to be discussed at the TAC meeting later today. So that will be further developed. But if we could get the SPA resolved, theoretically, the full CVTA could approve the agreement in its entirety with the exhibits in December, and then the CTB could immediately take them up and take action on them in December as well at their December meeting.
What's the path to make that happen?
Well, the TAC would address the SPA later today. Hopefully we get some consensus from staff that it's in form ready to be approved. It would then be incorporated into the MOA, and the CVTA would take action on that full package at its December meeting. Thereafter, it would be in the hands of the CTB, VDOT and the CTB to approve at their December meeting, which occurs after the December 4th CVTA meeting. So it's a tight time frame, relatively speaking, but we believe it can be done if everybody's working in the same direction. I mean, if there's glitches along the way, we may get delayed. But
has there been any indication of any glitches that are concerned?
I don't know how VDOT will react to the changes to the SPA. I haven't seen the comments to the SPA yet. Apparently staff, I believe from Chesterfield has provided some comments. Those are being circulated. They'll be discussed at the TAC meeting later today. I don't know how VDOT will respond to those. Hopefully it will be fine, but we'll have to see how they respond to that.
And Mr. Peterson, what I've heard is that, and first I just want to recognize the great work of the different staffs from the different localities on this work, on taking a look at this language, and glad to hear that we've all resolved that we can be all in agreement on something like this at this moment, which I think is major strides for not just for our localities in general, but just CVTA at large. And so I'm comfortable. But
Ms. Gregory,
yes, sir.
You mentioned also how germane and all these questions to the general law that we have to follow too. State law and some of these items there.
On the SPA? Well, the SPA seems to be in fine form. I mean, as Mr. Peterson mentioned, it's just a form. It's not, the idea is you're approving a form as a sort of a sample agreement that will be changed on a project by project basis and customized per project. But certainly everybody's interest is to get that in the best form that we can for both parties. So there's agreement, so that we don't have to make larger changes down the road and cause greater friction.
And this will be inclusive of all other parties that we try to make agreements with too, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, this would be the model special project agreement that would guide or that would govern every project that the CVTA enters into with VDOT as an administrator of that project. So that's why that's in place. So we're working through it. Could the SPA undergo some revisions? Yeah, it could be improved, but it's a good agreement to begin with. And were it approved in its present form, I think it would be acceptable. But I certainly understand and respect that certain member jurisdictions and their staff may have input that they want to share and they want to see some changes, and that's fine too. Let's consider that and get it moving forward. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do everything we can to get it in a form that both the CVTA and the CTB can take action on this in December, and then we can move forward. Hopefully,
And
on schedule, then we will.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, I think just to talk about the process, it is typical, it's customary at the CTB that we workshop any agreements or things that we would bring to the board for approval in the meeting preceding the meeting that we would approve it. I think probably many of your boards have the same process, just so we can provide adequate public notice. And so it is on a very, very rare occasion, and at the request of a CTB member, and I've shared with the various jurisdictions that if we can get this done, then I would ask for that leniency to be able to bring it in December, but it's not customary that we would be able to accelerate it and introduce an agreement and seek approval in the same meeting. So it is of some, there is a sense of urgency around this because typically we would take 2 meetings. I'm willing to accelerate it and do it in 1 meeting, in part because the SBA, as I understand it, is the form that that VDOT has proposed is the standard agreement that we've used in with the other authorities around the state. So the challenge here would be if you modify that agreement in any material way, there not only will be questions about why are we accelerating the process, because again, it's very rare that we do that, but secondly, why are we changing it? And so I just want to, again, appeal to my colleagues here that we want to be very thoughtful about, and this is about getting the dollars flowing into the jurisdiction's hands. CTB is not going to approve going to approve the movement of dollars without having a understanding of the terms and conditions. And there's going to be a little skepticism as to why Hampton Roads and Nova can agree to those terms, but Central Virginia can't. So I'll let Commissioner Birch speak to substantive issues, but I'm willing to do what I can to get it done in December. Ideally, if we could, there's a November meeting, and I'd love for you guys to have it done by then, and we could follow the more standard process. But if we can't get it done or reach terms, then we're going to be into 2021, and probably late January or late February before we get this thing approved.
Mr. Chairman, Steve Rich, the Commissioner of Highways for VDOT. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Brown's comments. As Mr. Brown has indicated, the previous set of SPAs that have been used as a model, and the MOA in this case is a model that has been used with HR TAC and NVTA. Recognizing that fact that if there are modifications to the SPA, we understand that, and we think that we can insert those comments as they need be. I understand that there's some additional comments that have been made by the jurisdictions. The sooner we get an opportunity to take a look at those comments, then I'll be in a better position to be able to advise how significant those changes are, and then being able to be in a position to document back, as Mr. Brown said, why those changes have been made and how that might affect consistency across other jurisdictions within the Commonwealth that have similar authorities. But one comment that I'd make back to CVTA this morning is certainly VDOT is committed to progressing the SPA as quickly as possible, incorporating those comments where appropriate, to be able to get to the December 4th meeting so that we can workshop it and hopefully have the action agenda item in front of the Commonwealth Transportation Board at its December meeting. Certainly, we want to be expeditious in this, but also recognize that when we do make some changes to agreements that have worked in other places, then there's a lot of other questions from other board members as to why there may be changes and how this affects consistency across the Commonwealth in other jurisdictions.
Mr. Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The MOA, we believe, is in a form that you all approved at your last meeting, and VDOT is on the same page with that. They've approved it essentially. All the staff has and their legal counsel have. So we think that's ready to go. And that underwent some modification from the NVTA and the HR TAC agreement. So revisions, VDOT has accepted revisions to that agreement, which were reasonable. The SPA would be the same case. Although the SPA that we have before us is based upon the HR TAC model, it's my understanding from VDOT's counsel that changes were made to that agreement. So that's a fluid thing too. So we believe whatever changes we request will be reasonable, and there's no reason why this can't move forward in December at this point. Now, as far as VDOT withholding funds, we don't believe that's consistent with the law. The CVTA has the authority and the ability under the law to requisition funds from VDOT, whether there's an MOA in place or not. And if that's a desire of the CVTA, we can make those requisitions, and that can be done, and it's allowed under the CVTA Act. So that shouldn't be a problem. If the jurisdictions want to move forward with that, there's by all means we should be able to do that. But again, the MOA is, we believe, in the offing. If we can get cooperation from VDOT and CTB, and we certainly would appreciate Mr. Brown's comments about sort of fast tracking the process to allow for it to be reviewed and approved in a single meeting. We think that can be done.
I'm comfortable with your original along.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other comments from the members, my colleagues?
Do we need to take any action on this, Mr. Chairman?
I don't think we do.
No, Mr.
No,
Chair,
I think-
I'm hopeful that the TAC will be able to have a fruitful discussion this afternoon and come to a recommendation quickly.
And then we'll get it taken care of in the next.
So that can be forwarded to VDOT immediately after, once they come to it.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Once we get the
Quick
SBA
consideration.
comments, the consensus from staff, we can forward that on to them and get their reaction.
I think what I hear the consensus is that you want to get this thing moving, right?
Yes, sir.
In a cooperative manner. What is your term?
Collegiate.
Okay. I don't see any more comments. And with that, we'll move on to new business. The new business, we have discussion items, the CVTA revenue inflows and outflows, banking services, operating administrative fund financial management procedures, and the CVTA revenue transfer procedures. We'll take up the CVTA revenue inflows and outflows.
Well, hold on.
Can someone explain what has been handed to all the members?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I will in 1 second. But thank you. I'm Matt Harris from Chesterfield County. I'm here on behalf of the working group. We haven't had a chance to dialogue with this body directly, so I think that's kind of our number one goal here today. We've worked with Martha and her staff and Chet, and that's been fantastic. But I think the group did feel like it would be useful to have some direct dialogue with you all and make sure that the time and energy that we're spending on your behalf is where you would like us to be working. So I think above and beyond anything on this piece of paper, that's really what we want to hear today is some feedback from you all in terms of how we can best serve you and be as productive as possible. Specifically, what's in front of you is really just sort of a draft work plan. So don't take anything on there too directly. But I think without having any direct conversation with you, what we set down and really kind of, again, picking Martha's brain more so than anything else, there's a couple of things that we thought that we should be working on really to try to position you for success at your December 4th meeting, if that works out. So the two main items that are on here, first and foremost, is a fiscal agent agreement. And just taking a step back, all that means is crafting a vehicle where CVTA can harness the power of the localities in the region. We're very, very fortunate as the Richmond region, have a lot of fiscally sound and really good practices in place in all the localities. And we've got regional models such as the convention center, where we have used similar things like this. And there's really no, in the working group's opinion, no need to reinvent the wheel. So we've looked at specifically the Greca model for putting some direct services and some access to some contracts in place. Again, I think that's the most efficient way to go. But I don't think you need everything that Greca has. It's sort of the Cadillac of that. There's some more talent, a broader pool, if you will, involved here. But so what we're recommending for you today, I don't have an agreement. I don't want to work on it without getting the green light from this body. But what we would be in position to do is to bring you back a draft fiscal agent agreement for consideration at your December 4th meeting that could handle any or all of these services. I think given some of your earlier discussion here, our focus has been primarily on the general banking, to figure out fiscal agent agreement that would run through one of the localities that would allow us to have those accounts in place sooner than later. However the money shows up from VDOT, you're going to need a place to put it. And so the working group is prepared. We can have that drafted out to the members prior to December 4th. They're pretty straightforward. We would certainly get everybody's buy-in on that. And then there are other services you could either amend to that agreement or simply create a second one down the line. But I think banking services, given where you're at in your life cycle, is the one that's most pertinent, and we can turn that around very quickly. There's some other details there, but that's a pretty straightforward thing. Like I said, we feel like we can deliver that as a group to you by December 4th. But again, we want to see the heads nodding in this room.
Can I clarify one thing? I think when you said fiscal agent agreement, it can be one, or it could be two or three or four. So we have the ability, if you feel like one locality is stronger in an area than another, you can assign tasks to the places where you're most comfortable. So don't feel like you have to craft an agreement where one locality takes all of these responsibilities. It can be multiple.
And there's precedent for that as well. Through the Convention Center Authority, the city actually handles the procurement, and Chesterfield handles the balance of those. So you can cut it up any or all ways. They're very flexible agreements, and something, again, I think all the localities are generally familiar with. But we would, with your approval, we would get that draft agreement out to everybody in plenty of time to have all the eyeballs on it ahead of your December 4th meeting.
Any comments from the members?
I would suggest that we do share this amongst the localities. This is a regional organization, and doing so I think would be more in keeping with what we're intended to be.
Yes, sir. No, we've had great conversations with Kathy C. from your organization, and really in the city as well. The nice thing here that will make this a lot easier at the end of the day is there's tremendous overlap in all of these areas. It's generally a small pool of folks that we are working with. So I think however we end up divvying this up, whether it's everybody won't have their name on the paper, but everybody's interest, I think, will be well represented by these agreements.
And Mr. Chairman, one of the goals we're setting also long range is that making sure that, as Mr. Peters said, we get information out, but particularly being sensitive to smaller localities so that they'll know what's going on and they won't feel threatened by anything like this. So it's very, very important to make sure that we disseminate information to all of them, because we talk about, a family anyway. So that's to me, it's rather important as part of that foundation.
Mr. Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would love to chat a little bit more with Mr. Harris and Ms. Coates about the agreements and their team, their finance working group. And then once we get on the same page there, we can take the draft agreement, circulate that among the jurisdiction's legal counsel, and get consensus from their perspective. So we're all working on that, working together on that.
Sounds great.
Okay, good.
Mr. Chair, I just think it's important that we get something moving forward. We're approaching that timeline where funds are going to be available for deposit. And we need to make sure that we have our accounts in order and the ability to receive the funds that from VDOT so that we can have some place to put them. And so I think this is one of those things that's time sensitive. there are other things that maybe we can take our time with, but this isn't one of them. So when we move forward at the next meeting, we need to make sure, like Mr. Thornton said, that number one, the outlying smaller jurisdictions don't feel like they're being left out, that they understand why we're trying to do this, that they understand that this is a practice that's already in place, that's successful. And hopefully they'll be okay with it, but we need to move forward on it.
And do we think that just asking for the entirety of the membership, the full body, that the membership would be comfortable with one locality holding the account for CVTA?
Mr. Mayor, I think part of what might help ease any discomfort someone might feel about that, it would be the policies and procedures that accompany that bank account, so that I think the way we would envision setting it up is that any disbursement from the CVTA account for regional projects or for GRTC would require multiple approvals from either the localities of the chair and vice chair of this finance committee or of CVTA, whichever makes more sense. But I think we would always have two localities sign off on any disbursement that's made.
And
That
that
was just piggybacking on Mr. Thorne's comments, and that's why I was compelled to ask the question.
and that's the second item on the sheet in front of you. We recognize we would, the first one is just kind of the vehicle to get you there. The second one is the details. Staff has looked at the Northern Virginia policies and procedures, which more closely align with your mission here. Martha has provided us with all that information, and I think there's, in relatively short order, we could bring you back alongside with the banking services piece, any relevant policies, procedures that went along with it, and we would have that for you hopefully by your December 4th. So you're looking at all of it in aggregate. You're not making a decision in a vacuum about the banking services without knowing how those dollars would then flow out of there. We see that as an entire package, and that's why these two are paired together on your handout.
Mr. Chair, I think it's very important that we move expeditiously on this, and by utilizing the existing strong contracts that all our jurisdictions have with banking and financial advisory services, I think we need to move forward with this approach.
I'll just have one added suggestion for a financial management structure. If we could include and have more definition of the roles in that structure, whether it's the CVTA full body, the CVTA finance committee, the finance committee chair, vice chair, interim CVTA executive director, CFO, county manager, clerk of the authority, and also an investment monitor. We can flesh that out a little bit more in the future. I think that would be beneficial for the entire body.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay. Any further comments?
So I guess I'll ask the question, do we need a motion for this, or is this something we can just move forward?
I think, Mr. Gray.
I would suggest or request a motion to direct staff to move forward consistent with the plan presented by the Finance Working Group.
I'll make that motion, just as you said it.
I was like, speak up a little bit, so we can have that recorded at least. There's a motion on the floor.
Second.
It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. The recommendation is made to direct the staff to move forward. Is there any, thank you, Mr. Hammond. Is there any further business in new business?
No, sir, I don't believe there is.
Okay.
I would call your attention that the handout that Mr. Harris provided also has a handy flow chart on the backside that kind of goes through the process and how the funds will be distributed and who's responsible.
Well done.
Mr. Chairman, this is Carlos. I don't believe in the material that's posted online that this handout or this document is there. So if we can just make sure it gets posted or distributed. I was able to follow along based on what's on the screen here, but I didn't have it in my materials.
Staff can make that available?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
You didn't get a copy of it?
It wasn't on the online agenda yet.
Okay. We need to get an email to them.
Yep.
We both designed earlier too.
Yes, sir.
And that brings up a good point. I just make a recommendation that if we're going to have handouts in the future, because some may be remotely, we need to make sure that they're emailed out to everybody on the board so that everybody has access to it, as opposed to just, even if it's done that morning of the meeting, we need to make sure they have it.
To the full body.
It's not just the full body with Mr. Brown.
Yeah.
He needs to be able to look at this the same way we do, with the same vision, and he can't do that if he doesn't have it in his possession. So in the future, we need to make sure that these things get sent out, even if we have to pause the meeting for a second to get it emailed to him so he has it.
Staff, can we make note of that for future meetings?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Thornton.
Mr. Chairman, as we go about to adjourn, I do think, and I hope I'm not naive in suggesting this, but I think this August group can handle it, but, in making that foundation firm, and I know that it'll be taken care of, but we probably should expect, as we form the foundation, sometimes, unfortunately, dilatory tactics by some groups. So we want to make sure that this group will be able to handle all of that. I think that's important to have expectations that sometimes are beyond the norm, but sometimes groups do that.
Any further comments? I will add that, I appreciate every member's, first, we've showed up to every meeting in the past, so this is our fourth or fifth meeting, so everybody's been hands on deck, because I think we recognize that this is important, that we get things moving as expeditiously and get these dollars into our localities. That was the main mission and purpose of this committee, to follow the finances. And so I want to say thank you to everyone putting the time in, but also thank you to the staff from the member jurisdictions as well, who've been working diligently behind the scenes to make this right for the future. Also, I would be remiss if I did not recognize Mr. Thornton, who has been nominated by the Richmond Times-Dispatch as Person of the Year as well. As a former Person of the Year, I am excited to see your nomination, Mr. Thornton, your long years of service in Henrico County, but not just to Henrico County, but to the entire region. And your work here as the chairman of the CVTA is just a testament to your long history and to your legacy, and your commitment to Central Virginia, to the Richmond region as well. So
Thank you.
best of luck.
Thank you for your kind comments.
Well said.
And with that, any further comments? We are adjourned. This edition, my case.
Every chairman should have one.
Yes.